Hi Booktube, it's Amy. I thought I'd pop in with a recent reads, or we can call this a Monday reads, something that I haven't done here on the channel in quite a while. Just to talk about what I've got on the go. I've got a small selection of books that I've currently got bookmarks in, and these are the ones that I've picked up in the last week. There's a lot more things on the go, but as I haven't read them in the last 7 days, I thought I would just keep with what I've read in the last week and since the previous weekend. So the first one on my list here is volume 1 of a 3-volume set that I'm working my way through. This is John Churchill, Duke of Marlborough, his life and times by the Right Honorable Sir Winston Churchill. So it's Winston Churchill, the Churchill we all know. There's his photo on the back there. Winston Churchill writing about his ancestor, the Duke of Marlborough, who was a military man and statesman in the late, I guess the second half of the 1600s into the start of the 1700s or the 18th century. I believe he lived from about 1650 until maybe 1722. But this is just one of 3 similar sized paperback volumes that came in a box set. And I'm not that far in. I still don't quite know what the Duke of Marlborough is known for. So far, I've only heard about the life of his parents and his upbringing and his early married life. It's got the sort of typical traditional formula of a biography. And of course, Winston Churchill's writing is just delightful. He talks to you in a very personable, almost intimate way. And he's just got this elegant flow about his writing that makes it enjoyable to read, and he can make almost any topic seem interesting. So the Duke of Marlborough biography, haven't picked this up in about a week. This was my train reading last weekend on the way in when I went into Kingston to purchase some books, and I got distracted by other things on the journey home. So I'm just about 155 pages in, about to begin chapter 11 here, but I'll pick that up probably not later this week. I'll pick it up maybe on my next train journey because it is quite small and compact and interesting enough to keep my attention for hours on end. But then I've been also slowly working my way through The Diary of Our Own Peeps by E.W. Harold. This is one that I talked about a couple weeks ago. I had purchased it here in Ottawa at Book Bazaar. And this is a collection of newspaper articles published between the 1920s and into the 1940s by a local Ottawa newspaper writer and editor, emulating the style of The Diary of Samuel Pepys. So it's quite interesting in that regard. Lots of little bits of local interest, but also very universal on some of the things that he talks about. Talking about the weather, current events, little anecdotes about his family, and I'm quite enjoying it. I guess, yeah, it begins, the first entry here, 1930. Was when the first entry included here was published, and I've worked my way up to, let's see, Wednesday, February 16th of 1938, and so we are starting to see some political events, particularly from Europe, make their way into the diary entries here, and I'm particularly interested to see what he wrote during the course of the Second World War. But I am enjoying that as kind of adjacent to my reading of The Diary of Samuel Pepys. I've got 2.5 volumes of Pepys's diary left, and so this is a nice light reading companion to go along with it. And it was published in the Ottawa Citizen initially, and this is a small fraction of his articles that were published daily over the course of 2 decades, over 2 decades, almost 25 years. And I have discovered that I think all the issues of the Ottawa Citizen are digitally accessible. So it is possible that I could go through day by day and read every last entry that's available there. But I think I would need a subscription for that. Certainly something to look into once I finish reading this volume, if I want to dig farther into that Pepys. So then, of course, I have The Anatomy of Bibliomania by Holbrook Jackson that I've been reading aloud here on the channel. You'll see my bookmark is just a small sliver of the way into the book. I don't think we're even at the quarter mark yet. So there's lots more to go. Probably days and days and weeks and possibly months and months, maybe over a year of reading here. But I'm enjoying working my way through this, even if I do at times find the language a little bit difficult. There is unusual sentence structure and punctuation, not simply written at all. In fact, Jackson seems to have gone out of his way to make his sentences as complex as possible. And of course we have lines of Latin thrown in, sometimes translated in the text, sometimes translated in the footnote. On at least one or two occasions, they didn't seem to be translated at all. It was as though we as the reader were, it was assumed that we would know what these lines mean. Perhaps when Jackson was originally publishing, his audience would have had a knowledge of certain texts, and it would be assumed that they would know that. But me, sitting here as a Canadian in 2025 who's never taken a Latin class in her life, never studied Greek, there's a lot of things that go a little bit over my head here. There's some French mixed in there as well. And the footnotes aren't always sensical. Sometimes they refer to a translation of something. Sometimes it's a reference to a title of a work. Sometimes it's referencing something that I don't quite seem to understand. Perhaps a callback to another footnote. But that's that. And then there's one more that I've picked up in the course of this week. This is one I picked up in Kingston, and I was reading it just on Saturday night as well. This is Dora Hood's The Side Door. No dust jacket here. But this is her very interesting memoir, published in 1958, of her time in the book trade in Canada, getting in sort of on the ground floor of the sale and collection of Canadiana as it developed over the course of the 20th century. And I think here she is when she was older with her daughter and a cat in among some shelves. But she started off buying the stock of a friend of hers who had attempted to start a book selling business. And she opened up a book room in her house, eventually moving it and having a side entrance be the entrance to the bookshop, separating her personal family's home from that of the business and shop. She was a widow with two young children in the 20s who took on the career and lifelong passion of a bookseller, and really found some very interesting things. I posted a short video here the other night about a section I came across on graphic publishers in here. In my experience, information about graphic publishers is, scarce, few and far between, difficult to find. It's been a couple years since I tried to do any extensive research online, but back in maybe 2021, 2022, when I first discovered the existence of Graphic, I had picked up maybe a dozen of the titles of graphic publishers, and knowing that it was a local publisher located here in the city of Ottawa, they had two different headquarters on various streets in the downtown, and I took myself to the street where one of their offices once stood. The building is long gone, but the street and the street number are still there. But there's not really a lot publicly accessible in terms of learning more about graphic. And so this was kind of fun to find. I would kind of think there's probably a lot more out there than I am aware of. It just hasn't been digitized. It hasn't been, input into Wikipedia articles, because perhaps books like Dora Hood Side Door haven't really been discussed or widely talked about in decades. And so this is a nice little nugget here. There's an anecdote in here about Stephen Leacock reaching out to Dora Hood to request to purchase a copy of a book that he had edited, because he himself didn't have a copy and he himself wasn't aware that it had even made it to print, according to the story as she tells it. Leacock, who is a very well-known Canadian writer of the 20th century, Leacock had been asked to edit a book, one of the last titles published by Graphic before they went bankrupt, made his contributions, and then in the end of 1932, Graphic went bankrupt, shut its doors, everything was kind of auctioned off, and as far as Leacock knew, the book had never been published and he had never been paid for it. So as you would guess, he was very interested to get his hands on a copy of a book of his that he didn't realize even existed. And being in the Ottawa area here, it's actually not too difficult to come across a Graphic title now and then, even though in some cases the print runs were very scarce, and they only published for just a little over a decade. They did not last long, but in the time that they did last, they published a lot of really, really interesting titles. And I had sort of toyed with the idea of giving up my search for Graphic. I even thought, do I sell some of those Graphic titles and make space on my shelf? But reading Dora Hood has sort of switched my mind back around, and I'm like, no, I will never sell my Graphic titles unless it's absolutely necessary, because they're easy to find now, somewhat easy to find. But I don't know if that's going to be the case forever, and this sort of reignites my interest in them and the desire to perhaps collect a copy of all the works that Graphic published over the course of their short lifespan, because there were a lot of really notable Canadian authors who were involved with Graphic. Frederick Philip Grove, and of course Stephen Leacock by association. I think Madge Macbeth as well, and a number of important historical journals were picked up and published by Graphic, making them available to the Canadian reading public in some cases for the first time since their initial publication a century or two before. So it's all really interesting stuff, and I need to get back to what I do own of the Graphic and finish reading my way through it. I've only actually read about half of what I purchased, 4 or 5 years ago now. And so the question is, where to shelve the Dora Hood? Does this go on the shelf with the Canadian literature and the Graphic and, my collection of Frederick Philip Grove? Or does this get shelved with the books on books? And as you can see, I'm only like halfway through. So there could be more information in here on Graphic, certainly more interesting anecdotes. And it's leading me to put together a list of other things that I want to purchase. For instance, there is a 2-volume history of the Upper Canada Rebellion of 1837 that I read in a very particular brown cloth and gold inlay edition. When I was in grad school, it was one of the first things that I checked out from my university library when I was doing my master's, and I read it and found it immensely interesting. And although I'd thought about it once or twice over the about 9 years since I read it, it's a little bit scarce, a little bit rare to find. I've seen a few sets for sale, maybe reprints published a couple decades after the set that I had read. Beautiful red cloth, but something has deterred me from wanting to purchase them because I kind of really want a copy of the exact edition that I had read from my university library. Now, it's quite possible I'll end up purchasing a reprint or one of the red cloth later editions at some point, because as far as I've seen, the brown cloth edition, only one is available for purchase online right now, and the spines are in poor condition, and it would need repair, and it's, you know, $250, 60 something dollars for something that would need repair. So that's not anywhere near my buy list right now. That would take some planning and some saving, some careful withholding from book buying for a month or two in order to budget that in. But I wouldn't want to purchase something that I'm going to have to repair. But I'm going on a digression here, talking about that work. But that's what I'm reading at the moment. We'll call this a Monday Reads and post it, and I hope you're all off to a wonderful start to your week here in mid-September.